Girl, and today we're trying the Teeling Whiskey Trinity. So this pack consists of the small batch that I've tried previously, link to that review is here below, but it's also the single malt and the single grain, and they all sit at 46% ABV, and I'm very excited to try them. So these are all Irish whiskies, quite different between each other, and I think they're all a little bit kind of quirky in their own way, and I do love a quirky whiskey, so can't wait to try these. But these were sent to me by Atom Brands and Teeling Whiskey, so thank you guys very much, because I've been looking forward to trying these ever since I kind of fell in love with the small batch. And of course they're going to host a really lovely tasting with Rob Caldwell for these Teeling Trinity whiskies on Thursday, so tomorrow when this is published, the 30th of April 2020 at 7 PM. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what they have to say about the whiskies and try them along there as well. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of kind of a preview of what my thoughts are. It's of course always interesting to try whiskies without knowing anything really about them, and kind of without any preconceptions or any tasting notes from someone else. So we'll see what I think today, and then who knows, I might have a different opinion tomorrow, but at least I know what it is now. So we're going to start with the small batch, which is of course the whiskey I have tried before. Small batch consists of both grain and malt whiskies that have been matured on ex-bourbon casks and then married together on central rum seasoned casks for up to 12 months. I think this has a really lovely kind of rum character to it. It's quite sweet, easygoing, but let's have a little nose and a taste and see what I think today. It definitely smells like kind of dried fruits, like dried fruits you would put in like a granola, like maybe some dried mango and dried papaya, so that kind of dried tropical fruits. And also a bit of kind of honey melon, very kind of juicy and fresh honeydew melon. But let's have a taste. Slangeva. You definitely get that rum sweetness along with those kind of tropical dried fruits. So juicy and so like fresh and full of flavour. I'm still in love with this whiskey. I think it's really good. I can't wait to see how they compare to the others. So let's go over to the single grain. So this single grain is a whiskey that's been matured exclusively on French oak Californian Cabernet Sauvignon, so red wine casks. The mash bill consists of 95% corn and then 5% malted barley. So it's a lot of corn in this, which will be very interesting to try and see what it's like. It definitely has that kind of grain sweetness, so on the nose. But there's something else there as well. It's like something is on top of the grain sweetness, so it's like something that's like lingering at the top, and it's quite difficult to kind of make out what it is. My initial thoughts are watermelon. I haven't eaten melon in months probably, so I don't know why these melon notes are coming today, but I would probably say it's like a grain sweetness, and on top there's like this watermelon flavour. Also like has this kind of fresh note and tropical fruits. But more fresh tropical fruits this one than the previous one, which was more dried tropical fruits. Let's have a taste of Slangeva. Definitely has kind of that red wine characteristics to it. You do get those tannins, but they're not too dry. They're still quite fresh and juicy, which I like. Because sometimes when you have a red wine influence, and of course especially when it's European oak, it can be quite dry and you often get like a bitter note as well. But my initial thought of this, and this is the first time I'm trying them, is that it's very fresh still, but you have that kind of almost like cranberry red berry note or red fruit note. And definitely that kind of grain sweetness that I absolutely love. Yeah, that kind of the grain sweetness along with some cranberry flavours and a bit of that watermelon still, just because it's so juicy and and fresh. So it'll be interesting to come back to this in a wee while, but let's move on to the single malt. So this single malt has been matured on 5 different oak types. Let's see if I can remember them. So it's sherry, port, Madeira, white Burgundy, and Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's a lot of really interesting kind of quirky casks that are coming together to make this. So this is of course 100% malted barley. It's a single malt. So let's have a little nose. Immediately you get that kind of single malt secure note on the nose. Don't know if that makes sense, but if you have them next to each other, it's really, really interesting. I think it's more of an oakiness that's coming forward that is slightly different to the other two, because they do have that grain sweetness element. You don't have that at all in this one. Yeah, that kind of dunnage warehouse note. This kind of damp, stone, earthy. Or maybe if there's some whatever French oak influence there is. It is still quite juicy along with that drying spice. I'm sure this is a really interesting one to just sit and sip and try to identify flavours, because I'm finding it quite difficult to name what I'm getting. Perhaps it's that mixture of casks that just gives it that explosion of flavour that's quite hard to pick out. Let's do this. So I'm going to come back to this one, but let's go back to the other ones and see what we think. So back to the small batch. The small batch has that immediate rum sweetness, which is lovely. I do not think it's too overpowering though. I think if you're a rum drinker and you're trying to get into whiskey, this would be perfect for you. It just has this kind of very, very smooth rum tropical notes. A little bit more tannin now on the palate. But yeah, I think the the most powerful note I'm getting on this is that rum character. That's still kind of juicy and those dry tropical fruits. Maybe if you put honeydew lemon in rum, that's what you get from this. And the single grain. This one definitely has that grain sweetness, but it also slightly reminds me of bourbon. Don't know if it could be that high kind of corn content. But it's not something that you generally find in, for example, Scotch whiskies that's been matured in ex-bourbon casks, but this is more of what you would find if you nose a bourbon. But slightly, like a bourbon when you turn down the volume, that's the notes I'm getting on the nose. I think the grain sweetness, which makes it really fresh, combines with those kind of red wine tannins. There's definitely, if you drink a red wine, you have the drying thing, and I usually get it like on the top of my mouth, and I get the same sensation with this. Really interesting combination of those red wine casks and the grain sweetness. I'm enjoying this one. And let's come back to the most difficult one, the single malt. It definitely smells like a whiskey warehouse, because it has that kind of damp wooden note. Or perhaps when you're out in the woods, because it does have that kind of pine scent to it. It's like a pine tree after it's been raining, perhaps. Yeah, you get that oaky tannin vibe, which is very different to what you get from the single grain, because the single grain has a tannin that like lingers at the top of the mouth. This one lingers on the back of my tongue, and it's more of an oak, like, I don't know if this makes sense, but it's more like licking wood. I've never done that, but I could imagine that if it tasted good, this is what it would taste like. So it does have that kind of a more spiciness than the single grain has, and that more kind of depth to it, more like robust whiskey. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by this. If you gave this to me blind, I'm not sure I would be able to pick out that it's an Irish whiskey. I think it reminds me a lot of Scottish whiskies that I've tried. Just with that spice and the dry tannins as well. It makes it really interesting. I think that if you want something sweeter, maybe you're looking for a way into whiskey, or maybe you're loving whiskey and you just love rum as well, or you're a rum lover who wants to get into whiskey, or you just like a little sweet treat, then I would go for the small batch. My first love within the Teeling world. But if you want a grain, if you like grain whiskey and you just want to try something different, or perhaps you like red wine and you want to get into the world of whiskey, the single grain might be for you. I'm super intrigued by this. I love grain whiskies, and I love when you do something different to them, like they've done with this matured on Cabernet Sauvignon casks. It just gives it another element that's just very interesting to explore. Even if you like single malt, so you just want to try something different, just a short little move over to trying grain whiskies might be something that will amaze you. If you want something that might remind you of a Scotch whiskey, or you are looking to start out in the world of Irish whiskey, or if you just want to try and see what a nice whiskey is that's been produced by combining all these different casks for finishes and maturation, and you like something that will remind you of standing in a whiskey warehouse. If you've never done it, do it. It's one of the best things in the world. But this just reminds me of that feeling, the sensation when you step into a whiskey warehouse, and it's just so nice. You get that scent and experience. I think when I sipped this for the first time today, just a few minutes ago, it definitely brought me back to stepping into the warehouse at Glenfarclas Distillery, which is one of the first distilleries I went to, where you got to go into the warehouse. And just standing in there and like looking at all these casks that are just peacefully resting, waiting for its time. Yeah, that's incredible. That's what this reminds me of. If I have to choose a favourite out of these three, I kind of want to say the small batch because it's my first love, but then that single malt just makes me think of stepping into a warehouse, which is one of my absolute favourite memories. Then again, that single grain just gives me that red wine, grain whiskey combination. Two things that I love very much. So maybe it's the single grain. What's your favourite? I'd love to hear. I think today, the mood I'm having right now and the way I'm feeling is, yeah, it's probably going to be the single grain. But I'd love to hear what you think of the Teeling series. Have you tried any other Teelings perhaps? Because there's quite a few out there as well, and they're doing some really interesting stuff with maturation and finishing. And like you can see, these three are a great example of all the different things they're doing. If you want to pick up a Teeling Trinity pack, they are available on Master of Malt, so check that out. I think if you want to get started with something like this, or are curious about Teeling or about Irish whiskey or just whiskey in general, trying these three next to each other, just a little sip of each, is a great way to explore how different whiskies can be, but you still get that underlying character of those tropical fresh notes that I found in all the Teelings I've tried so far. Are you getting tropical fruits on the Teelings, or what are you getting? Is there anything that I've said that you agree with or disagree with? Please do your comments below, and as always, if you want to follow me on Instagram, the link is there as well. But I hope you'll have a lovely day. Slán